Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And we return this week to our Video Nasties segment, and we are looking at the New York Ripper.
Yeah, we are looking at Lucio Fulci's. I believe I'm pronouncing that correct. Lucio Fulci's New York Ripper. I always love when we do Video Nasties. You know, it's I don't know why. I think it's just such a fun segment that we do. But the films themselves kind of have that real 80s kind of low budget, high gore, strange quality about them that I just absolutely love. You know?
Yeah, I was going to say they're they are all like the peak of 80s, but at the same time they're also these kind of films that are like really like I love looking into how they've kind of pushed that boundaries, and some of them push the boundaries to the point where like still to this day they are like that's a dirty way of doing things. It still seems gross, or it still seems like impactful. Some of them not so much sometimes, but most of the ones I think we've seen, we've been like, yeah, actually that still to this day is effective in how they've gone about it.
Good. I'm trying to think of off the top of my head the ones that we've covered. I know we did Nightmare in a Damaged Brain. This is my part where I cheaply plug them so people can go listen to them. Because I know we did Eaten Alive, we did Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, which was super weird. We did The Evil Dead.
Last House on the Left.
Last House on the Left.
The original.
I did The Burning with Neil from We Needed Roads podcast, which was a good fun one. I'm trying to think if there was anything else, or maybe this is just where we've got to so far.
No, I don't think so. I mean, when you were doing solo episodes, you did do a partially Video Nasty.
Yeah, a little partial.
Little partial. The I can't actually remember.
Necromantic. I don't actually know if that was an Evil Dead. If that was an Evil Dead,
that was a Video Nasty. I don't know. I thought that's what you gave it. A title of a partial. Dead and Buried. Dead and Buried now.
A partial one, I think.
Okay. Necromantic seemed like one that would be.
Yeah, it did. It definitely did seem like one. But for some reason, I couldn't find it on the list. But before we jump into it, I will do my usual spiel of reminding you please to hit that subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review. It's always good to see us get a new review, and we've overtaken Spotify as our most reviewed. It used to be Apple Podcasts, but it's Spotify now. So just please remember, whatever you're listening on to, please hit the subscribe button and leave a review. Now let's get into it, King.
The New York Ripper. So because we're recording online today because yesterday we were doing a 2 men and a baby situation with me both looking after my daughter Eliza while trying to fit in a day of fun, and we did try to fit in some Hellraiser. We only got one done, but
we're slowly working our way.
Slowly working our way through those films. So today we are recording at the same time as being mindful of baby that could wake up at any time. So 1982's The New York Ripper. So this is an odd film. It's not I wouldn't say it's necessarily one of Fulci's most loved films.
No.
It's one of his weaker reviewed films. Even though it has got its own cult status, I think just for the fact that the film is weird. The film is very odd.
Really weird.
I mean, Fulci normally is quite odd and jarring for people that don't get the style.
Yeah. When he's in that, I mean, I did that short solo episode on foreign horror, and I kind of briefly spoke about, Giallo and, the kind of weirdness of it and the certain quirks and charms that you've got to get your head around. And I think if you can get your head around it, then you'll kind of fall in love with the genre. But it is stuff like being dubbed, particularly with like 80s Italian and just Italian horror in general. It is kind of like we were saying in the car yesterday, it's kind of weird soundtracks that definitely don't fit the tone of a horror movie.
Well,
fit porn movies and high gore and like a lot of the times it's just like, all right, we've done like a horror 10 minutes. Now let's give the people something to beat off to, it's just that kind of thing.
I mean, about like this one that might be more jarring than everyone said. Like I've seen a couple, but not that many. Like he obviously did Zombie 2 or is it Zombie Flesh Eaters or whatever you call it in your zombie, or Zombie or like wherever you're from, meant to be going on the hype of Dawn of the Dead and things like that, like kind of thing. It was kind of like the Italian version of them making their own sequel to George Romero's stuff. But in those ones, I said to you, like the dubbing I kind of got, because I was like, I know that it's an Italian person who's done a dubbing kind of that. The thing that's jarring with this film is the fact that it's the New York Ripper. So one, you're expecting to see a film based in New York. But the odd thing about the way that this film was made was the fact that all of the exterior is New York. So it actually is shot in New York. But everything on the interior was shot in Rome and is Italy, and most of it is Italian actors or French actors who are being dubbed over, except for the main detective, who I believe is an English actor, but he's still dubbing his voice on top of his voice.
Yeah, but
it's such a jarring effect. Everyone is, and you've got characters who sometimes you're like, I mean, it sounds like your voice. It just sounds like the editing's really bad, and then sometimes it's like, that doesn't sound like that person's voice at all. You sound like some weird screeching. I don't know why, but you look at a person and go, I don't imagine that you sound like that.
I know. It's
not
really
that we
weird.
Actually know.
and that's the thing. It's like they film it and then they dub over, and obviously that leads to a weird thing where usually when, people are talking in films or doing things in films, you get varying different sound levels, and people who are further away might speak at, different tones. But with, Giallo, everything is kind of at one consistent tone, which is just loud, and everything sounds like it's being read, because it obviously is. And then the other is that sometimes they get, if it's a small role and that person's not able to come and record their voice lines, then you'll get somebody else recording their voice line over them. And in some cases, like the worst cases, are the scripts actually changed because they were like, oh, there's a plot hole, or oh, this line actually doesn't sound good. So you have somebody who just saying a completely different line over it. And it adds to this, like, I find it adds to this kind of surreal fever dream kind of effect to it. The first time I watched a couple of these, I didn't know whether they were dubbed or not. So I was really like, is this just a really bad, like, quality? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But once I got into it,
I literally did. I forgot when I came to watch it. So I watched the first one. I was like, I've obviously gone onto a bad copy. Let me try another copy. And I was like, it's still bad. I was like, oh shit, yeah. I remember what I'm watching now. I'm used to this kind of thing, because I keep thinking like, oh, should I just get the English subtitles and should I do it in Italian instead? And I was like, wait a second, because they've done it in that's the point, that they've done it in that style. So it is, and it will be, like I was saying to you yesterday, for anyone who's very much like within, like, I tend to hate like there's a lot of the old like kung fu movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I can never really take them seriously because of the dubbing and the voices. And anytime I watch it, if the dubbing, if the words are out of place, it really annoys me. It like bugs me. Like I can't watch a copy. So someone might say, "Oh, it seems to be like a minute fast, this copy." So I'll be like, "Right, I'm done then." It's off, and I can tell it's off, and it's going to bug me the whole film. I won't be able to enjoy it. But that's why you've got to wrap your head around this. Anyone who's into like a classical filmmaking kind of style, you will be thinking a lot of, like I said to you yesterday, you'll be thinking, God, the editing is bad in this film. God, the sound editing is bad in this film. Man, this film has like a weird ass structure that doesn't seem to go, all these questions. And yet like I said yesterday, there is that odd charm to the fact that this film almost feel like Frankenstein films, or Frankenstein's monster film, to be specific. Like they feel like Fulci is the Frankenstein, and he's made these monsters of films which are like parts of other people's ideas, parts of other things, where he's kind of spliced it together. Then he's added his own layer of sexual exploitation over the top of them. Like that's what a lot of them have felt like to me, like so far. But there is, in terms of like a horror part of it, there is a great deal of like good gore when it actually gets to.
Oh yeah, like Fulci's. I mean, everybody knows he has, kind of like a fetish for destroying people's eyes, which is brutal. And I haven't watched one of his films where I haven't winced when it's come to the eye. And I don't know what it is. Like
Zombie 2 is one of the best. The eye into the spike of the table or whatever it was, kind of thing. That's
so bogging.
And then in this one we have a razor blade that slashes through the eye, and it is brutal. And it has a range of different techniques in this film for different ways that people are killed. So he does use like stuff around them quite a lot, and a lot of like sharp everyday objects are used to like mutilate, and it is all very like this. The sadism, the sadistic nature is very much, obviously, this is New York Ripper. It kind of feels a bit like, the old like Jack the Ripper kind of playing against women, and kind of the way that they see them, or seeing women as like basically like whores and stuff like, what I mean? Pretty like much, that kind of way is the way it is. And it is that odd part in this film where you've got one part that's like a cop detective thriller, where it seems to be quite like just mainly focusing on the cop and his life at parts. Then you've got the part where it's like it is like a standard slasher, like a point of view kind of slasher.
Yeah.
And then you've also got this other part that's kind of like a voyeur kind of film, like I'm blanking on what they're called. There's like a French porn film that's people Emmanuel is what they're called, like those kind of films, like they were seen as like French but like classy porn, basically. And there are parts of this film where it does go like right. It's like I said to you yesterday, there's about a 20-minute period where it no longer quite feels like it's about a serial killer, because it pretty much just follows mainly one woman as she goes around getting different things done to her sexually, or different people. Every character suddenly has something sexual happening around them for about a 20-minute period, and there's not really that much mention of any killer at that point. It's pretty much just one voyeuristic sex scene to the next, either sexual innuendo or sexual part. Or,
and the weird thing is, obviously, like everybody in this film is fucking, like obviously sex is like a central theme of Giallo and Italian horror films.
Yeah.
And in this one, it seems to be like sex, religion, and or cultism. Those are like the three main ones that you get. But in this one, you get the detective, who I kind of love that. Even though it's like, it's 1980s New York, he still kind of feels like he's from like a 1940s noir movie, and everybody kind of talks like that in the police station. But he's having an affair with a prostitute. And then you've got this person who they think is the New York Ripper, who's like, missing half his hand, and he's like a sexual deviant, and you follow him around like
I think he was meant to be like a model of some kind, because you see him like modeling posters and stuff like that, but like sexual, like he was a porn star, a porn magnet is mentioned at one point, but you're following that really creepy dude who, and
then you have the woman, and then you have the woman. Sorry to cut in, man. And then you have the woman who's I don't remember
Jane.
Her name,
I think her name is
Jane. Yeah,
the wife of like a. I don't even know what his deal was. I don't know. I don't know what the guy. He was a rich guy.
His wife.
He's a
rich man. Yeah, rich man in a big house, and
he likes to keep recordings of her. That was one odd, but she went to, the first time you see Jane, she goes to like a live sex peep show, and and you get a whole voyeuristic scene of her like getting excited and touching herself and while she's recording it, and then he has the recording and he seems to store these recordings, so you're kind of like, what's going on here? Are you like, is this like your weird kink relationship, like you do this and you record stuff and you go off with other men and stuff? But then it kind of goes away from that and starts to make it seem like she's more just going off to find other guys, and somehow I couldn't really follow that part, but it was
it's also weird because there's that scene where she's in the bar, and there's the two people who start like harassing her and like making her drink a beer and whilst they're touching her up, and I swear that part goes on for like
it's an odd
10 minutes, and it's really weird.
And this one's not for the guy. If there's any women out there who have a male foot fetish, then you'll probably love this scene. It's all about the kinks on this one.
It is. It's real like kinks, isn't it? But it's super weird, the whole film.
It is, yeah. You get several of those scenes with her, which is like, and she's a character you feel like was going to just die really quickly. You thought she was going to die following the Peep Show. Then you think she's just going to get caught out again. Then she ends up having, she has sex with that weird guy, so she ends up in bed with him.
Oh, that bit is awesome.
Yeah, like and he's it constantly seems to be about shots of her crotch. Yeah, everything is about like literally Fulci is like I said to you, like our last episode, The Birds, was all about Hitchcock, and we're saying that when he was directing Blondes, he has one hand on the camera and the other hand, and I'm pretty sure Fulci is just constantly like just whacking it the whole time he's filming these films. Yeah, and he's like, oh. Yeah, what's my next kick? But that is a cool scene because obviously at that point you do think it's like you're not sure if he is or isn't kind of thing, the killer. Yeah, because at the start we had a point of view kind of shot where we followed, and I thought the whole film was going to be mainly the point of view, and it does for the killer actually continue. But there's a scene before they go into that Peep Show where you think they've revealed the killer because he's then stood there as the point of view changes. So then you're like, oh, has it revealed the killer or is it trying to throw us off the scent? And it's kind of that kind of, I wasn't sure when we first watched it.
Quite cool, you know. I think that part is pretty interesting and pretty well done. Obviously, so like the film opens, we have like an old man walking his dog, and the old man's really weird as well. He keeps saying like, get it at his dog, which is just strange.
The best line in that opening was and it just straight away showed me that kind of odd kind of European or Italian humor, is the fact that when he bends down, he goes, oh, instead of going like, oh, my back, he goes, oh, my balls.
Yeah, so
that's the line he said. He's like, oh, my balls, like when he's like bending down to get the stick, and it's like, yeah. So it almost straight away is like, straight away you're like, wait, you're not done properly. Wait, that's a weird line. Straight away you're like, okay, at least it straight away shows you what kind of thing it's going to be, because the humor's very odd.
Oh yeah, the humor's weird, man. But then we get that, we find this decomposing hand, and then we follow like another like woman on a bike, and we have the typical like Italian horror soundtrack. I don't think it's Goblin doing it, but it's like, it's like slap bass. Yeah, and like, I
told you it was like a 70s cop show to me.
Yeah, it's still like that.
It sounded like if you watch one of those American 70s ones like Starsky and Hutch or Kojak or something like that. Like, it's literally that kind of like bum 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 bum.
Yeah, it is. And I love it, man. And then the detective is like trying to find out who the hand belonged to, but we see the first woman who does get killed kind of driving her bike and being followed in a car by the New York Ripper. And she like breaks into, or she hits somebody's car by accident, and then like I just love that this is like the way in which they'll speak to each other, but everybody's such a dick to each other. Yeah. And this guy just says to the woman, "You're a menace to society, and women have brains the size of a chicken."
I don't know why. Why did it make me think of George Costanza from Seinfeld?
Yeah,
I looked at it. I was sat there going, I don't know why. I feel like that's something that George Costanza would say.
It would. I love it, and he has that. He's kind of got that Costanza vibe. I love Costanza. He's so good. All you need in this film is Kramer to be the New York Ripper.
Yeah. They get she gets the so she goes to kind of get revenge and like goes on the ferry, doesn't she? And then she's writing inside the car, and that's kind of where we get the first of our kills with her.
Yeah, which is kind of POV shot, isn't it? You know, it is.
Yeah. Well, you see her talking like she said. It's very much. It reminded me of like Friday the 13th, you know, when she's in the car at the school girl in the car at the start and they're like looking. That's the kind of shots we get. Like it is all until you get like to be fair, actually all of the killer shots, most of them are point of view except for sometimes when the killing happens is normally when it cuts away to like a more of a wider shot. But when he's like, you do follow him around, but you start to think you're following different killers and murderers and stuff like that. Hers is quite because you get the whole like she's screaming trying to get out of the car once she realizes something's wrong. It's very weird that she's so happy to just sit there kind of chatting to a guy that's just walked along, caught her doing something. Like she's like, I'm gonna get in trouble, so I better talk. Like I was like, I'm gonna get in trouble, so I better talk to you. And then she's just she's kind of sat in quite happily until he starts to be all weird and makes duck noises.
Oh yeah, I did not know that at all, man. You know,
the quacking.
The quacking.
I had heard of a horror film about that, like is so weird because it has a Donald Duck like sound of a quacking guy. And coming into this film, I didn't realize it was this film. It is weird. Very odd. At first, you almost might even not like. You might be like, what's going on? You might get confused and think it's the radio or something weird. But as it goes on, you'll notice it much more.
Well, before that, we get a phone call. No, we don't get a phone. We get the detective.
Yeah.
And he's talking to the woman's landlady or something. Of the hand that they found, and they say like, she was on the phone to somebody. And he was speaking like a duck.
Yeah.
Or he was speaking.
Or he was quacking at her. Yeah.
And I thought this is really weird, but I was like, oh, they're doing like, it was like a doctor, you know? So I thought
like a quack. Yeah.
Like a quack. And I was like, oh, so I don't know. I was like, oh, she was on the phone to the doctor, and then when the killer started and the quacking happened, I was like, oh no, they mean he was actually
quacking. He actually does that raspy Donald that.
Yeah, it's literally that. And he's like
it's hard not to be like in my head, like even though they use like a certain like later on they use a certain like doll to explain it certain things, but it's hard not to be in my head like as if it was like Fulci or someone being like a bit like consumerism of Disney or something like that, like they're the evil of America kind of thing. Because it just seems too obviously Donald Duck.
And I'm sure it is actually the voice because when it's so distinctive, you know.
But it's so weird. It's just so out of place in many scenes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think you have to get your head around the nuances and the weirdness, because it is that kind of film where it's like a weird, 70s cop music and a quacking killer. So there's some suspenseful moments, but you never quite watch it as like, oh my god, I'm terrified of what's going to happen. You quite watch it as like, oh, this is a cool watch, it looks cool, it goes well,
The weird humor, like, and the cracker is almost a bit that I feel like sometimes undermines to make it kind of almost to the point where you start to see it a little bit satirically or something like that, like you feel like it's so, everything has been so kind of like turned up to 11 that it starts to feel a little bit like surrealist kind of, which that's obviously a lot of the Giallo kind of is trying for a surrealist, like the French New Wave kind of style. They were very linked. So like it is all quite surrealist in that way. Which is why, like, in my head, I was like, at some points, I was thinking from a video Nasties point of view, I was thinking, like, who takes this, like, who can almost take this so seriously that they think it's going to be that harmful? Because most people, I feel like, would have just dismissed it like, this is, like, most general audiences would have just been like, this is terrible. Like, I'm not scared because I'm like, what the fuck is Donald Duck killer? I'm waiting for a guy to come out in a blue top and no pants.
Just hanging brain, killing people.
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh in it.
But you have a point. Like, when you look at the previous video Nasties we've done, we had The Last House on the Left, and that had like
weird music. That was the only odd bit.
And like the cops were a little weird.
Yeah, yeah.
But outside of that, it was pretty, it was pretty
serious,
graphic, especially in the 70s. Yeah. And then Evil Dead, which is pretty, I still think today, which is pretty gross in moments.
Yeah.
Eaten Alive was gory, but and quite quirky, but I don't think it ever quite jumped onto this. But it still had some pretty taboo things, like young teens, Robert Englund trying to ass fuck teenagers, for lack of a better word. And then you get to a film like this, and it's like, well, I mean, the eye scene definitely. Eye scene is fucking
that's the thing. I feel like a lot of these things in my mind have covered over the fact. That's what I kind of meant. Like, that surrealism kind of almost makes a layer of it where it almost a little bit of times you don't take it seriously.
Exactly.
Even though there is actually, like, I definitely can, from a video Nasties point of view, see why. The sexual, the voyeurism, the exploitation, the violence towards women. That definitely, but as we were talking about the gore, like with this first one, for instance, until she gets it, I kept thinking it was just going to cut off, to be honest, because she was trying to get out of that car, and like she started screaming as if something had been stabbed into her. So I thought, oh, it's just going to cut off. I was like, I was expecting more violence from Fulci. I was expecting this bit, and then actually no, she ends up getting pulled back into the car. It cuts away for a moment, then comes back to her. Then she gets pulled back into the car again, and then with like a switchblade, he starts like slicing up different parts of her body. And properly slicing it apart. Yeah, so and she does get quite brutally like sliced up and cut up, and that gore does continue. Like, so we've said the prostitute who the detective with obviously gets sliced up with a razor blade through the eye, down the eye, and you get to slowly see it sliced down through it, and she also gets cut up in other places and sliced up. Yeah. One positive I think is actually quite good is that that one's a sudden one, the prostitute, but a lot of the other ones, like this, the girl on the ferry, the girl on the bike, the live the peep show, the woman at the peep show who gets killed, the Jane who I mentioned before, the rich lady who gets killed later on. One good positive thing I do say is that actually a lot of these aren't just like sudden deaths. So quite a lot of them, you actually follow them for quite a little short period of time to let the kind of suspense build a bit. Like the Peep Show one, for instance.
The Peep Show is really weird because that's, like you were saying, that's when we get the POV scene of I can't remember his name, but Johnny Two Hands, I'm just gonna call him. Johnny Two Fingers, whatever.
The missing two fingers.
Missing two fingers, and it's kind of weird because it reminded me of Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, which was also kind of Italian, and they all have that, like you said, that seediness. They look at that part of New York as being like nowhere near when you see it looking in films nowadays, especially. It looks a lot better. It's kind of a place you want to go. They make it look dangerous, and they look at like the rotten part. It's like Taxi Driver in that way. It looks at like the underbelly of what's actually there. And we see him walking through. You were mentioning about like the overdubbing, and there's a bit where he gets a ticket from like an Arab dude, and it's clearly like some Italian guy
doing a really bad accent.
Doing a really bad, like borderline racist accent. Because they're like, well, we didn't actually record him doing this voice line, so you do it. And there's just one guy just doing an impression of it. And then we get the reveal of this two-finger lad, and you kind of do think that he's the killer. And then he goes into the peep show. There's two people just like fucking, and there's a whole bunch of people watching, which is really weird. Because you always assume that not many people are going to be there, but it's a full house,
Yeah, I was going to say, no, I think, there used to be quite big things where people would, I'm assuming mainly men, but occasionally people, or even couples and things like that.
Like, do people actually go and just like beat off? And then
they must have made money because they were around for quite a long time from
it's weird.
The 70s. I think it wasn't until the early 2000s that some of those were gone finally from New York and places like that.
Maybe,
yeah. You still have ones I think in Amsterdam. Apart from that, mainly most of them are gone. But apart from that,
what I found interesting was another little subvertive expectation was this time they had the instead of your classic male pervert in a trench coat beating off, it's a female pervert in a trench coat beating off. A little gender switch there. The trench coat is is the apparel of businessmen and street beaters.
Well, it's the difference in these kind of films. If it's a man who goes into that theater and beats off, it's going to be this is a dirty, smutty kind of film. If it's a woman, it's like, oh, this is voyeuristic. This is art.
This is art. Yeah, this is art. It's completely fine.
It reminds me of again, so many things in life remind me of Always Sunny, but it's there's an episode where they have to review the film, and Frank Reynolds is talking about that they need to bring people back to theaters and community, and then the woman realizes that he's actually talking about the porno theaters. Yeah, and she's like, "What do you mean that?" And he's like, "Are you talking about porn? I'm talking about community, honey."
Yeah, it is literally like that, man. And that the second death is one of the performers who kind of, goes off stage and then goes into her room, and, we get the light bulb's been broken. She stands on it, and it's kind of, implied that both of the people, the man with missing fingers, who they think's the New York Ripper, and the woman are both disappeared at this point. And they make a real emphasis that, Two-Finger Lad isn't there, so you're like, oh, this is the fucking dude. And then when she goes to get changed, you hear you hear Donald Duck again, stab her in the puss with a fucking broken bottle. And it's not massively gory, but it is pretty gross when you think about it,
Yeah, no. I think there's quite a bit of blood that does come out, like blood flowing through the bottle, I think. So it's quite a cool effect that it suddenly appears with that. And obviously it has quite a suspenseful, because she goes into a room where the lights are all out and she thinks her manager's hiding in there or something. Yeah. But again, it doesn't go straight into it. She kind of sits there for a bit, and it's a bit odd, she's waiting around, and then finally it's Donald Duck, you whore. But again, that's what I meant. It gives a little bit of time for it to build up a little bit. So there is definitely a start to trying this out. But as I mentioned to you, a lot of this stuff is said to be basically we've talked about the script being a little bit all over the place, and this was a case of, I believe, that basically Fulci didn't like the producers at first didn't like the script, then Fulci didn't understand the new script, and then 5 days before they started filming, Fulci was to a new script writer, he's I want you to make a new script, and in 5 days, or at least not necessarily the outside, but the dialogue, he wanted it to be better, different. And the dialogue is odd and strange, and it's someone who's never been to America or New York who's trying to write dialogue based on, again, I think based on a cop show that they've seen on American TV or something, like a shitty American TV shows of the time. So you've got this whole odd dialogue, but then it's even been said that Fulci basically just added a bunch of the sex stuff that wasn't even in the script. He just went off and started filming that could happen in a restaurant, or it could happen in a peep show.
Yeah, he's just like, oh yeah,
Or
wow, we've got this great set piece taking place like in a bank. Yeah, bank.
yeah.
What about a peep show?
Well, it's like, yeah. Oh, she could get stuck in like a room or an elevator with the two fingerless man. Now, how about she has sex with the two fingerless man, leading to the rich lady's death?
Yeah.
Like, which is a bit like he keeps popping up throughout. So of course he does lay the seeds that he is the killer, and you start to just like think that, which again is a kind of a good for. And then she's has that whole scene, and then it cuts away and it shows that basically he still is a bit of a fuck because he's basically looks like he's been beating her during sex. Basically, he's tied her up, and then like she's literally covered in like bruises and scratches. But it's not until, but she still doesn't seem too concerned at that point, which again maybe shows her kind of what she's into, that she's really trying to push the boundaries, which is why she's in trouble, because she's a woman that's constantly looking for that boundary to be pushed. Because I don't know, not happy in her relationship or whatever it is, sexually like wants to come out of that kind of repressed husband or whatever.
After her death, they talk about it, and it's an actual stone cold like thing when you think about it. It's like your wife's just been murdered, and now I'm just going to play you a recording of her getting banged. Like, it's really weird when you think about it.
But really it is. Weird.
He says to her, like, the detective kind of says to the husband, "What's the fucking story?" Or so, I'm paraphrasing. And he's kind of like, well, she's a great wife, but like people have like different sides to them. You have to let them indulge in it, and it's kind of like he knows what's going on. He's like fine with it. That's what I
mean. There's that weird
something that they've agreed to,
like a sharing thing. Yeah,
but the scene where she picks up the two-fingered guy is really good, I thought. It's kind of so they pick up. That's after she's had the scene where she gets like molested in the bar.
Yeah,
and one of the guys looks like a young what's his name? He looked like the guy from Key and Peele, Keegan Michael Kay. I don't know if you thought, but he looked like a young version of him.
I didn't think that. But...
No, I did. But either way, she gets molested, and then she picks him up. They have like BDSM sex. He ties her to the bed, and on the radio, there's a disc jockey who kind of does like a very Warriors-esque moment where he's like, if you're out there, Mr. Ripper, please leave our women alone. And then he says, like, for all you women out there, be careful of a man who's only got 3 fingers. And he's nutted, so this dude's asleep, like fast asleep. She's tied up, and then she hears it. Sees that he's got like 2 fingers missing and starts to freak out and sneaks off. And it's quite.
That's the point when she looks freaked out as well. It's like after everything that's happened, you're thinking, "Oh, were you into that?" But I guess you were into that until she hears that, and it's like, okay, now you want to escape.
and I think the cool thing is, like, at that point in time, we think that he is the killer as well. We don't have anything to show opposite, because there's a couple of like
we have met the actual killer by this point. I think we have met him in a scene or so.
Yeah,
the younger guy who actually is. Guy looks
like Eric Foreman.
Yeah, Eric Foreman.
Yeah, Eric Foreman. In that weird dream, that because a lot of Fulci's films do this. They introduce after quite a few of the players have already been set up, because at this point, we've already introduced the weird 3-finger guy, the sex-obsessed woman, the detective, the like university psychologist lecturer that they've gone to, get like a profile on.
Yeah,
who is kind of like not like a main character, but quite a big supporting character. So we've already introduced quite a few characters by the time the actual killer and the kind of the new central character has been introduced, the final girl, if you would. Even though Giallo, it's not really like a final girl as per se. She kind of is.
Yeah, it's hard to say because she's not there from the start of all of this, and she's not like prominent from the beginning. But she is like, because it literally it's like halfway through the film when she's introduced in like a fever dream where her partner is the one trying to kill her in the dream kind of thing. Which to me was like, oh, that's a big clue. It seems like that's okay. That's the killer. And I feel like you were getting at. I found it like this is one part that I thought was just like, it seems a bit odd. Like he seems out of place. And to be honest, throughout the film, their whole part of the film is the part that suddenly feels out of place. It feels like they've just been shoehorned in to have someone else be the killer as like the twist. But if they'd been introduced earlier in the film and we knew that this was something we were following, like his daughter and her in the hospital had been introduced earlier in the film, then you might be able to follow it and track it and fit. But because he's just suddenly introduced and he doesn't even really get that much to do. It's more about her. It's more about the one that's recovering from hospital.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of occasionally there. Like he doesn't actually do much by himself really. So it's just, he feels out of place and he feels a bit shoehorned suddenly into the plot. Like we had to find someone to be the killer. And we want it, instead of being like the odd outsider guy, it's actually the normal everyday guy, which again, totally would have worked just if it had been put in earlier in the film, I think.
Yeah.
Because all of their scenes I found really like fell flat. I felt like they were like the low points in the film. Like I was quite enjoying the voyeurism with the rich lady, and I was quite enjoying the detectives parts and the parts with the killer and the different women. And then the second it got to this kind of odd like B plot or C plot or whatever you'd call it, that part, every time they were in it, I was like, I don't really know, why are we suddenly caring about these characters? Why do we suddenly need to invest in these characters? And that's why, to me, straight away it seemed obvious. It was like, it's because now you've introduced the actual killer. That's it.
I do agree. I think
it felt a bit lazy.
I was thinking as soon as it started, it's got to be the detective, isn't it? That he's like mental and he's doing it. And there was
that's why it's all point of view and stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know whether that was the best way to go about it, but I agree. That the little subplot introduction, and as characters themselves do kind of fall flat, but I think that her introduction as a survivor of the Ripper, and being the one who's like, I saw three finger guy on the train just before, is, I get that it's kind of a logical way of introducing her. I think, like you said, it's just the scenes that they have do fall a little flat.
And that it was also quite confusing because it didn't match up with the scene itself, because it said the whole subway and that she was the survivor, but she also saw him, her partner. She saw him in that kind of part. So that's why I was starting to be like, is it a dream? And also in that one, obviously she's meant to be attacked, but she gets her throat sliced, but her throat isn't scarred, or her throat isn't slit. So I couldn't tell whether it was a dream that she was and she'd had something else happen to her, or whether she was actually attacked. And I think they do say she was, and that's why I was a bit like, what happened? Were you attacked by someone, or was that the dream of you and you were actually only slightly attacked by someone? Or you see what I mean? Like,
well, we know she was attacked because she sees the guy on the train, and then the Ripper goes to attack her, and the knife like scratches or chips off a bit of this wall, and she goes back later to the scene of it, and she sees that on the wall. But it's after that she gets chased into like an old like movie theater or something like that, and it's somewhere across the line that it becomes a dream sequence.
So it's like, it's like we're seeing it
weird.
recalled but mixed in with a dream, which is a cool idea. But sadly, at this point in the film, without knowing them, it becomes a confusing scene instead of a clear like idea of what's kind of happening. Which again is, I mean, some of it is cool, and like the subway scene and stuff like that I liked. But yeah, it wasn't quite as effective. It just generally there was just something about them that just felt so out of place. It felt like, and to be honest, their part of the story I think is the one major thing from making this film being a better Fulci film than it is.
I agree with you on that.
I think the whole subplot, including the daughter and the Donald Duck part, I think if you removed that whole subplot of the idea that they came up with, again, not in any particular order anyway, so the whole subplot of like basically when it is revealed it's him and it's like his daughter's toy almost made him be an avenger of, they say it like an avenger of an avatar of his actual self. Like he uses it as a form, and it's just like, what? That's the weirdest fucking like I've ever heard of someone taking on the form of something. Like if you took on the form of another person, or if her daughter loved, like I said to you yesterday, if her daughter loved like some kind of masked figure, and he'd gone around in a mask, like I'd like that. But the whole idea that he doesn't even dress like a duck, which again would be even more fucking weird. But you know, the fact that the only part he's taken on is he's seen his daughter's toy every day, he's been in the hospital, and he's like, my daughter's never going to get to be like these whores, or something like that.
It's like
it doesn't feel thought out at all. It felt like that's the part where I'm like, that whole 5-day script thing, I feel like I could imagine that's where that came from. And they were like, oh, we need to add in more of like the script writer almost was like, we need to add in more of like a final girl kind of character, you know what I mean? We have that, so let's introduce them, and let's not just go with the standard we're following the killer, let's add in a different color. And I feel like that just all feels so odd, and yet I feel like that's the part that probably Fulci actually liked, and that was the part he was like, this is a better script because it's weird and it's different, and it's like, oh, I haven't seen that before, instead of it just being a standard, this guy is a killer, or even a twist like the detective is the killer. He would have gone, no, that's too normal, that's been obvious. Done. Like that's too obvious. Let's have Donald Duck.
But you're kind of right. It's strange because by using the Donald Duck thing, you do get these kind of quite cool moments where he rings, the detective, and he's like, he's winding him up basically. He's quacking at him, telling him that he's got to kill someone, he's got to leave a tribute for him, and that is when he kills Kitty, which is the prostitute that the detective's having an affair with, which is it's a gross scene, and this is a bit of film that I want to talk about. So we get this phone call saying he's got to kill someone as a tribute, I think, and then we see Kitty tied to a bed, and they're trying to, as they do, they're trying to triangulate where he's from. He's got to keep him on the phone, and that's where he puts the razor blade slowly down her face until we get to the eye. He goes over the eye and into it, and the eye is still moving, which is gross. It moves a little bit.
Yeah.
But he kills her, and he kills her, and I think by the time he gets there, obviously, she's been absolutely brutalized. By the time they found out where the location's coming from, there's then this really interesting part where they find the body of the three-fingered guy. He's killed himself, right? And then I don't know if you picked up on this, but the psychotherapist is playing a game electronic chess throughout the film, and he says this line after that woman's dead, and after they find the body of the person, and he says, "Checkmate. You think according to fixed patterns like a cop." He says that just as a thing that's cut, like a shot that's edited in. And I thought, oh shit, this is the twist, is that the psychologist has actually been the New York Ripper, the body they've just found is the real psychologist, and the New York Ripper's been playing a game with the detective, and I thought that's actually quite a cool twist.
Yeah.
But then this scene is just never referred to again. It's just like you think to fix patterns like a cop, and then it's just like
the psychologist seemed like to me actually seemed like the most obvious one to be the killer, and it was just because the Eric Foreman dude we'll go with because he's so shoehorned in. It felt so obvious that he's going to be the killer from the second he's shoehorned in. But no, you're right. I did notice though that kind of that checkmate and the fact that it kept referring to chess and things like that. He seemed most logical because he was brought in by the cop. I mean, I know that might be an obvious plot choice in like a lot of horrors and thrillers and stuff, that the cop is the one that brought in the actual killer to do it and doesn't realize it. But no, that bit, and again, that's what feels again like it's been like these changes where certain scenes of certain script points have still remained, and they've just left them in there, like as if the psychologist was because even that, if it had been the psychologist and he had kind of framed that guy, or even framed the Eric Foreman dude, and then imagine the scene you get at the end with the daughter crying, that would have had such more of an effect if you realize that he's actually been framed.
He's been,
so everyone thinks that he's the killer and he had actually been framed. Or if the psychologist, even if they come up with some shitty thing like the psychologist had somehow brainwashed the guy or made him do that kind of noise and stuff like that, and then you realize the psychologist is like, actually the one who's brainwashed him to do his bidding or whatever kind of thing, and then he's got the scene with the daughter. But because you don't have any of that, like certain scenes just no longer, like that one doesn't make sense. And the weirdly dark ending with the daughter crying about her dead daddy just suddenly seems so out of place, because it's like, one, we didn't even realize the daughter was still alive, which is part of, I think, what they think is a twist. But really, it just leaves this oddly dark tone on a film that mainly felt quite like kind of quirky and like slightly satirically voyeuristic, humorous, surrealist. And suddenly that ending feels very much like a different film altogether, like a different ending. It feels like that we're meant to feel sorry for the death of the killer, but because they've made him the New York Ripper, you're kind of like, well, sorry, little girl, but your daddy's your daddy's been torturing their thing. So I'm sure you'll be better off with whoever adopts you instead, because that's not. It's just such a weird note to end it on.
It's really weird, and I mean that. So they find out that they date Three Finger Guy's body as being 8 days dead. Kitty got killed 4 days ago, so they're like, well, it has to be somebody else. And then they give us this like weird.
The guy in the morning is literally like such a dick about it. He's like, "The fuck you saying?" He's like literally like, "What are you saying? Like, I'm not." Are you saying I'm not a qualified person? You've known me so long. He's basically like, like, "Fuck you! I can do my job, you piece of shit."
Everybody in this film's a dick. But then they start talking about the possibility that it could be a woman, and there's only Faye left in the film at this point. So you get this strange bit where they then go back to like the apartment of Eric Foreman and Faye, and there's just this really weird bit. So Eric Foreman's introduced as being like a physicist or something, and there's he's just randomly doing an equation on a board, and I just like the idea of like he just does that for fun on an evening. And there is this kind of bit that they introduce that's when they introduce the daughter, and it's strange. They introduce the daughter like they haven't introduced her for the whole film. Like the last 10 minutes she's in it, in that kind of like air vacuum bag, to keep her in, because she's got, I don't know, she's got something that will just wipe out the world or something. I don't know what she's got. And the nurses are like, she's never going to grow up. Nobody really comes to visit her. She's got a father in Brazil and a mum who's not around anymore. I'm sure they say like mother or father in Brazil, and the other one isn't around anymore. And then we get like a phone call. and both answer it. Eric Foreman answers it, and Faye answers it. And Faye has been in the kitchen before, and she's looking around, and she notices like a scuff on one of the knives in the kitchen. And then they both answer the phone, and we hear the Daffy Duck voice, but we don't know who's talking to who. And it's quite cool. It's done quite well, because like she picks up the phone, and then when we see her in a shot put it down, it's Eric Foreman who steps away from it, and it looked quite cool. And we get that whole thing of like, oh, actually, like one of these is the New York Ripper. And I was thinking, oh, actually, it might be Faye, and she might have made up the whole that she was attacked by him and someone else. And then, because she then stabbed
Which
him.
also would make the earlier confusing scene of the dream sequence and the lack of certain scars and stuff make sense.
Yeah, that would make sense. And it is actually like quite confusing, I thought, because it's kind of like, oh, who is this? And then he's just like, runs at her, starts quacking, and gets stabbed.
Like I said before, it does feel like it's stitched together of different ideas that then no one kind of fully developed. So it's like, it does feel like you've got the 3 stages of a script, and they've just, instead of carefully going back and removing parts that they no longer decide to go with, they just kept adding parts onto it and covering over parts without going back and checking if other parts made sense anymore. And so, what I mean? It does. Yeah. The whole idea of that like 5-day script does totally make sense in some of the ideas here, because you're literally like, yeah, I can see how like they didn't really think this part through, or they didn't check to see if that line still made sense anymore, or if this character still makes sense anymore.
Yeah,
and it does. The third act, I do think, kind of falls apart a bit. The gore and the brutality is still good. But when really
Foreman gets shot.
Oh, that's
so funny.
But it's like a mannequin head where it just like blows through him. I loved it. I was like, that's so good. I thought that was great. Yeah,
like when you get a quick
and really funny,
on, like a game. Yeah. Or like when you blow up a zombie's head on Resident Evil, it was just like that. It just explodes. It's so funny, and it's so clear that it's just a mannequin. And I imagine like Fulci has just like hates this guy. Who's acting him, and it's got like loads of different ones, and he's just like one hand beaten off, one hand with a revolver, and he's just like bang, blows the head up, and he's like, no, do it again, replaces it, just blows the head up, and just keeps doing it, because it's so like so violently explodes.
It is, yeah. It literally goes straight, because it literally is like a mannequin, like statue kind of plasticine kind of head, so you can see the way it cracks like that, and yeah, so odd. And then again, that the daughter, that followed by the daughter, like the daughter, like daddy, like that. Which again, the change in tone is so odd in that way. The way it goes, we find the killer. We got the killer. Bang, dead, explosion, which is both kind of like cool but kind of funny. Then you get that daughter scene, and you're like, what? Okay, that's weirdly dark. And then it's followed by the 70s cop music.
Yeah.
Which then undercuts that dark scene completely, because it doesn't match the tone at all. And you're just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's so. I mean,
it's such a. It's a fun watch. It's just. It's just so. It's so odd.
I don't think it's definitely not Fulci's best.
No, it's very inconsistent. Yeah. I know consistency isn't really the top of his list, but I do think it's much more so than the one or two other ones that I've seen of his. I think, but it does still, like most of Fulci's, for instance, a lot of Fulci stuff is video nasty.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was banned. This one, so I can go into the video nasty part. I can definitely completely see, in terms of the gore and the violence towards women, I can see why they would have banned it. Obviously, this is 82. So this is actually pushing towards the end of the video nasty era. It's getting much closer to that. So when you'd think that they'd maybe let certain things off, but I would say that because of the way that women are cut up with everyday objects and stuff like that is one thing. The way that it kind of has that kind of male gaze on the women constantly, like different body parts and sexualized, and there's a mix between a kind of sadistic nature towards women, but also like that constant kind of ogling of women and showing sexual scenes of a lot. You don't really get a lot of the male kind of like, you do get some male having sex with women, but a lot of the shots are mainly still focused on the woman, not the man.
That's it.
So I can see from those point of views why this would be banned, because I can see there's certainly things in here that are probably more either people struggle with, or where they could see that maybe someone would take on the idea of this more than probably even say other ones like Evil Dead and stuff like that. Like this one's much more real, so you can see why they would ban it.
It's a lot more grounded as well than the other kind of films that we've covered,
Yeah. Weird to say with this film with a Donald Duck that it's grounded.
Yeah, Donald Duck, Swamp. I mean, compared to a man,
I think
who,
apart from Last House on the Left, this probably is the closest to being like a real kind, like it's so you can see really happening, unlike some of the others which have been a little bit more supernatural or strange in different ways. So the BBFC. Because this one really was like, this one is one of the ones that was really kind of pushed away and took a very long time for it ever to recover. So in the United Kingdom, the film was screened for the BBFC, and one of the women in charge, Carol Toplowski, described the film as simply the most damaging film I've ever seen in my whole life, and a relentless catalogue of eponymous anti-hero villain cutting women up. So they hated this film. This one got a proper. The film was banned, obviously, in the United Kingdom, and it was out in America, but even then, it got limitations in other parts of the world as well, and it wasn't allowed to be sold until 2002. So 20 years it took. So it was originally banned due to its high level of sexual violence against women. That was the main contention point, which obviously makes sense within the context.
A lot of, I mean, that is a lot of horror films.
It is a lot of horror films. Yeah, there was a lot of other ones that have a lot of horror towards women that were not so badly kind of taken apart. And I think it's with this one, it's because I would say like there are ones that I don't think were as badly treated, more mainstream ones that actually had a lot of violence towards women and death and blood and gore. Like Friday the 13th films and stuff like that have plenty of that kind of stuff in it. I think it's the sexualized part, isn't it? It's the voyeurism part of it that is really the part that makes it feels seedier, doesn't it? It feels like it's going into the dark underground of things. Sexual violence against women, and although it was finally released 20 years later, the film actually remains censored on most copies. There's a breast slashing scene that remains unacceptable in the BBFC guidelines, so it's still banned. So even if you get the Blu-ray and stuff in the UK, you still can't see that scene. The breast, and I can actually think, breast slashing scene. Which scene gets the breast slash? I don't remember a breast slashing scene.
I mean, it would have been.
It would have cut. It's cut, so it is still cut. Yeah, in our copy. So we didn't see that scene.
I could imagine it maybe in the dream or during Kitty's death. Probably, I think that would have taken place, because that's the one where she's tied down naked.
The Kitty scene, and after slicing her eye, he slices off her nipple.
Oh,
he slices one of her nipples off. That's the scene in question that happens with her. And that wasn't on my copy, and apparently it's censored in most parts, and several parts of the world as well don't accept that scene. They see that's a step too far for a level of violence beyond slicing an eyeball in half. Is just about acceptable, but slicing a nipple off, that's going too far.
That's definitely too far.
I think it's that specific to maybe like, yes, men have nipples, but it's specific to like a woman or like a kind of that kind of maternalistic part of people that is like that's like really taking specific damage towards a woman kind of thing. I think
that is pretty clear, like sexualized violence. Definitely. So I can kind of see that.
So I absolutely can see why this is a video nasty. I think, to be fair, I'm not surprised that a majority of Fulci stuff was a video nasty, to be honest. So we'll definitely be back on Fulci again for our take on some of his other ones that have certainly we very much enjoy them. I know some people out there might be a bit more mixed on these kind of styles because of the editing style or the fact that it's not your standard classic kind of filmmaking style. But if you haven't given these a go before, I'd say start opening your horizons, get past the dubbing, and I think you'll find some odd stuff to enjoy in these kind of films. And any of these censored films, I think, are ones that people should pop out, because this is why we do Video Nasties. It's for us in Britain anyway. This is a major part in like history of film.
Yeah, it is. It's a big part,
and it's one of those important things that we kind of come back round to. But I think that people should see these films at the back, because a lot of them also we said when we were out at the shops, and we were saying like a lot of these films that were banned first time release, and you see them in shops like first time ever release on Blu-ray.
Oh yeah,
but not just Blu-ray, released in general. And a lot of them we were like, well, probably because they were banned, so no one ever really heard of them. So some films never got a fair shake. There are horror films out there that have not had justice. We're here to give you that justice.
I know. I mean, I'm a big fan of Italian horror. I've said it on the podcast before, and I don't think this is my favorite Fulci film.
No,
but I agree. I think people should watch them. I think there are a lot of them that flew under the radar because they were not only banned, but because they're not. The mass appeal isn't there. I don't think they do have the quirks and the eccentricities that people kind of need to get their head around. I think the dubbing is definitely one thing. You got to be able to kind of get into the idea that actually it's got to be dubbed, and it might feel a little bit off at first because it's so clear that it's dubbed, and it kind of has this surreal fever dream to it, and the pacing is a bit strange, and the plot points are a bit not just inconsistent, but it's kind of scattered, and it kind of plays loosely with themes, and it's more interested in telling something cool and and playing with these themes than it is so much telling a cohesive story at times.
Absolutely.
What were your overall thoughts on the film before we finish?
I think I enjoyed it more than I thought. When I first started watching it, I wasn't too sure. But I think as I kind of got used to it, I definitely enjoyed it more than I thought. I feel like in a lot of terms, as I said, like if this was a different director or a different thing, I'd be saying that this is probably a mess of a film, but it's still fun in a lot of ways. Yeah. The gore is still good. For people that have got a bit of a voyeuristic nature and like to see these kind of parts, there's definitely something I found something interesting in those kind of parts. I think that they were interesting the way they showed that kind of seedy underground of like New York, and he did that, even though it was actually Rome. It was I think that was interesting. I think it is almost too bad for the film that they didn't almost kind of lean into that kind of part more, that Fulci didn't really go for the seedy voyeuristic killer, really go for the kind of almost Jack the Ripper style of, the murderous, like dark and gritty, slightly darker and grittier kind of way, and go away from more of the having to feel like, it almost felt like they were constantly trying to find a twist. When I'd almost say I would have been quite happy if it was just a straightforward point of view killer and detective kind of, sexualized, like this is what New York City is for this. Like these people are getting themselves in danger because they're putting themselves in these situations. These women are in danger because of some of these things, and for all different choices and all different ways of life that the women were living in New York at that time. I think that was an interesting story. I think when they tried to add in the plot points and stuff, and I do think the Donald Duck thing is just a bit too ridiculous to pull off. And the explanation is probably one of the worst twists I think I've seen in a horror film. To be honest, I think it's one that just doesn't make any sense at all. It is a nonsensical. It's like The Happening, the Mark Wahlberg one, where it's like the trees did it. It's like, yeah, okay. You're being clever, but you're really not.
No, I agree. I think I really enjoy most of the film. I think I love the weirdness of the soundtrack. The gore's great. I think the first two acts, I think, are much stronger. And I think I agree when he's leaning into the voyeurism and the sex and how that's kind of linked in with the Ripper and all of that kind of taboo stuff, it's a lot stronger of a film. It's kind of when they have this weird kind of a plot, and then we find out who the actual killer is, and then it's kind of it's just it feels like they realized, oh shit, we've only got like 15 minutes left of this film, we need to wrap it up pronto. That's kind of the feeling I get. I agree. I think it either should have had a better twist without Faye and Eric Foreman being introduced. It should have had a better twist that, like like you said, the psychiatrist was maybe behind it, or they should have just stuck with Three Finger Man on the kind of on the loose doing this, and just had a bit more of a straightforward story and focused on that, because the Giallo aspects are quite cool. The voyeurism's pretty cool. It's just when it kind of tries to have this, oh, this dude's doing it because he's got a daughter who's never got to grow up and never got to be beautiful like these women, and they're not, staying pure and taking care of themselves. So he's going to take it out on them because they don't appreciate it, or they're abusing it. It's kind of like, well, I mean, that's cool, but that could have been a bit more fleshed out.
Yeah, it definitely is. It should have lent more into the. I liked the point of view thing, and it's very much from an artistic style. It's very much like the Michael Powell and Peeping Tom, the UK British film, which was one of the first to give you the point of view, and one of the first that kind of caused this rising up of them starting to be like, these horror films have a bad effect on. That was a 60s one, but before the video Nasties, but it's one of the ones that caused one of the biggest stirs before they introduced the video act kind of thing to stop it. So I think if it lent more into that point of view and worried less about giving some interesting like twist or something on the film, I think he could have actually had a really strong film here. Sadly, it's watered down by just some odd European, sometimes even feels a bit Euro trashy. You know what I mean? Kind of choices that kind of dilute it down. Have you got any other things that you want to add?
No, I think I agree. I think I would recommend people watch it. But I think so. I think you've kind of summed it up, man. Okay. So well, as always, it's we hope that you've enjoyed the show. It's been a fun little trip to New York to hunt down the New York Ripper. Please hit that subscribe button. It really does help the show grow. But in a couple of months, we're going to be doing our 100th episode. And we are looking to hear any films that you want us to cover in particular. So if there's a particular film that we haven't covered and you really want us to, or you got a favorite film and you want to hear what we think about it, come and let us know your thoughts on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at CMTH Podcast. Let us know your thoughts on New York Ripper, Video Nasties, and what you'd want us to cover for our 100th episode. Please hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.